I have a story plus a question at the end. So please bear with my story. 40 years ago, I enrolled as a parkow, at Uban Ratchathani, Wat Pananachar, and got on the train.
40 years ago.
40 years ago,
Mm.
this November.
Mm.
So it's cold there at the end of November, as you know.
So I was 2.
That was my first shock. There was many. I got on the train and went up there. The ride out from the town to the actual compound was beautiful. Rice fields, everything serene. So I arrived there and they took me to my kuti. And my first shock was, where's the mattress? There was no mattress. There was just a grass mat and a pillow and a light blanket. That was my first shock. So that afternoon, the Ajahn wanted to have a meeting with me. So the first thing he said to me was, everything you do here is for a reason. It's to get the city out of your mind and to become mindful and to be in tune with your mind. Every single thing you do. Good. Okay. So the next shock was getting up at 3 o'clock the next morning or praying with the monks and sitting in meditation. The next shock was I had to work every day. And being a forest monastery, there's tons and tons of leaves. So the whole day is spent raking leaves. And the other thing was drawing water from the well. We drew the water from the well in those days, you probably remember, pulling up, winding the handle.
Mm.
So after a few days, the Ajahn called me in again and said, how's everything going? I said, quite exhausting, and I can't sleep very well. And also I've got bad diarrhea. The food is so spicy. He said, I'm right. Everything will be okay. Just take your time, you know. So things got better. And he called me in again and he said, everything you do is part of your meditation. Every time you sweep the leaves with a rake, breathe in and out. It's like yes, right. It's like walking meditation. The other thing is also when you're walking meditation, keep to the track. Don't go on the grass. Otherwise, you might come across a big king cobra. I went, oh my God. So I talked to some of the other monks and said, is it true? Was he just trying to scare me? Is there a king cobra here? They said, yes, there is. But don't worry about him. Sure enough, a couple of days later, there he was on the grass, and he was big. I don't know if you ever saw him. But so I sort of crept around, you know, doing my walking meditation. And of course, the next day, the monk said, did you see the king cobra yet? Yeah, I saw him. Don't worry. He's an old monk that's come back to protect us. So these are all the experiences I had. And after the first week, my diarrhea dissolved. I learned to do my work with a mindful state. I learned to get used to some of the green snakes hopping on the roof of my kuti. And I learned to get a good night's sleep. And I learned to wake up right on time for meditation in the morning and praying. So this was one of the best experiences I've had in my life. 2 months of learning a whole new thing that I never knew before. And one of the best memories I had was going out on Bindabat with the monks in the morning, but also walking over to pay respect to Ajahn Chah, because he was in a coma at that stage and they wheeled him out. He was like in a oxygen tank. Right. So they wheeled him out for us to pray. for him. And I'll always remember seeing his face. And the greatest teacher, probably on this earth, I think, the greatest teacher of Buddhism will ever be. So that was my experience. I learned to meditate well. I got better and better. And by the time after 2 months, I think I was quite good at meditation. But as I got older, I'm a lot older now, some faults are creeping in. Like, I was born with a monkey brain, and it's hard to get rid of that. And I'm afraid my monkey brain is awakening again. And I have thoughts coming in, which I find hard sometimes to get rid of, or try not to get rid of. But that's my experience that I'd like to share, and the wonderful time I had up there at the temple.
Yeah, thank you. I love hearing these stories about the early days. That's I love hearing about it. It's very
So
good.
The question is, how can I get rid of my monkey brain? I know many people have asked you this question, but
Well, I'm still trying to do that as well. So yeah, it's less trying to get rid of it, and it's more like not giving it power. Like if we don't pay attention to it as much, then it doesn't have as much power. But if we say it's a big problem, then it gives it a lot of power. So a lot of it is disempowering it, and then it's trying to get our attention, doing tricks in front of us and jumping up and down. And if we just don't pay attention to it, I mean, you mentioned Luang Por Chah as the ultimate teacher. I mean, a teaching of Ajahn Chah comes to mind where he talks about the monkey mind. And he said, you have to treat it just like a father treats their young child. He said, so the young kid at first is asking all sorts of questions about the world. They're maybe 3 or 4 years old. They're talking a lot at that point. They say, what is this? What is that? What is this? What is that? Look over here, look over there. And at first the father answers all of its questions and gets involved with it. But then after a while, when the father has heard enough questions, all he does is go, It's one of my favorites. So with the monkey mind, then if it's doing its antics and jumping up and down, we just say, oh yeah, okay. It's just doing that again. So we know it because it does the same things over and over again, calling for our attention. But yeah, it's good to hear about the early days, the water hauling. I never experienced that, not at Wat Pah Nanachat, because by the time I went there, can I ask who was the senior monk? Do you remember their name? Was it Ajahn Jagaro? Okay, so he was just before Ajahn Pasano. Yeah, Ajahn Pasano took over. Yes. His early talks, I've read a lot of his early talks and listened to some of them from way back, late 70s, early 80s.
I love the stories he shares about when he first came to be a novice monk with Ajahn Chah, and the things that Ajahn Chah called him. Some of the comments he made about him, He shared all those, just wonderful,
Yeah, he's very honest about his own mental
honest
states and his own practice, and very humble. Yeah, I think his nickname, his name was Robert, so Ajahn Chah called him Robert, which means to explode, because he could explode with anger. So his nickname was Robert. But yeah, his Ajahn Sumedho is very humble about that. And Ajahn Jayasaro's nickname, because his name was Sean, so Ajahn Chah called him Chan, which means spoon.
นมัสการค่ะพระอาจารย์ I am a teacher in Bespoke Vocational College and first of all I would like to thank you Angel team to give us my teacher and I to join this fabulous retreat. We found it's very interesting and useful for us as a teacher. So I have the questions about my students. As we are now in the world of digital era, and young generations nowadays, they believe in themselves and technology. And yet they also believe in something concrete more than abstract like drama. And some students don't believe in any religions in the world. They say to me they don't believe in the truth of life in Buddhism because they think that they cannot prove like science. I would like you to please kindly tell me and give me advice about how to help them to understand the truth of life and the nature of life and also the powerful of mindfulness. Thank you.
Yeah, two things is that one is all children will be different. Some might have karma from past lives to feel drawn towards the Buddha's teachings, and some might not. So if someone isn't drawn towards the Buddha's teachings, it's going to be very hard to convince them. However, that can change in mysterious ways if they experience the right type of situation. Maybe they experience some suffering, or they meet a monk like Luang Por who's very special, who can talk to them in a way that they understand. So with children, has to be what age groups? You're talking college or high school or
Vocational college.
Okay.
They are young teenagers.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
The things that I asked you because in the lunchtime, after I have lunch, I will walking meditation and they come to me like, teacher, what are you doing? Walking meditation. It's waste time, teacher. My grandmom always do that. I ask them that, why do you say waste time? I don't understand. I asked them and they said,
you have to be creative with your answers. You can't just say I'm doing walking meditation. So when Luang Bu Man was doing walking meditation near the village that they didn't know anything about monks or what he was doing, and then they asked him, he was walking back and forth, and they asked him, what are you doing? And he said, I'm looking for something. And they said, what are you looking for? And he said, I'm looking for Buddho. Whoever finds it is the highest in the world. And so it's like something like that, like we'll get them curious about it. But if you say like, well, I'm just doing walking meditation, it's good, they won't really understand. They won't know what. So I have to kind of like see who's asking you and maybe try to answer in a way that will have an effect on them. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, there's that. So, but then to talk to them or to teach them that particular age group is not easy. It's more about in this modern age, it's difficult. We have iPhones and a lot of distractions, but it was also difficult before. And it really depends on, each child is going to be different. It depends on the parents and the type of upbringing they had. And so a lot of times what children of any age group want is just to be paid attention to. So to pay attention to them somehow, or to engage them somehow, or to invite them to join you with what you're doing with practice somehow, if you go to the monastery. Although it's hard for young people to get into the traditional practices. So in the end, it's really up to our own practice and our own example. So I know in Thailand these days, not all of the monks are the best examples. And that's why a lot of young people have turned to Christianity and other religions and have lost faith because the monks aren't keeping their precepts. But if the monks keep their precepts, I found the young people get inspired by that. They see the monks who are doing something that's difficult, and then that inspires them. Especially young men might feel like, oh, that's somebody who's doing something difficult that's worthy of respect. So I met a Thai man who he's Christian. He became Christian because he ordained as a samanen when he was young in Bangkok, and he saw the monks not doing good things in the monastery. And so when he left, he decided he wasn't Buddhist because he didn't want to be like them. And he became Christian. He eventually got married, moved to America. But he likes to tambun, like he's like Thai Christian, like it's okay to tambun. And so he was driving me from Pacific Hermitage to Portland for a teaching. And he was asking about the precepts and about money. And he was telling me about his life when he was summoned in and how he became Christian. And I was just explaining the precepts, like we aren't allowed to accept money, and we can't use the money and accept it in any way, and we can't ask for it. We aren't allowed to do fundraising. And he said, oh, if I would have met you guys when I was young, I never would have become Christian. But that was just, so his faith actually came back from meeting monks who were keeping precepts. Yeah. So a lot of it is just our example. If people are wondering why do you keep the precepts, you can just explain the 5 precepts. They're very easy to explain. You just say, well, if you don't kill, then you don't have any experience in your life associated with killing. Just think about that. You can't possibly experience anything associated with killing because you're not killing. So it cuts out a huge amount of suffering. If you don't steal, you cut out all of that suffering associated with stealing. Just imagine stealing something. You don't have that anymore. And sexual misconduct, the same. Lying, if you never lie. Think about when you lie, you have to protect your story. You have to remember what you told this person. You have to remember what you told that person. And you don't have any of that suffering. You're so free if you have the precepts. There's actually a podcast I listen to sometimes. He's a military guy, but he seems to have quite a bit of Dhamma. Is Jocko Willink, and people may have heard of him. And he has a talk called "Discipline is Freedom." And I think that's really, he talks about just that thing. Like if you have discipline, that actually is freedom. But if you're young, you don't think that. You think you're not free if you have to keep precepts. But if you keep precepts, you actually free yourself. It's the opposite. You free yourself completely to have all this energy and all this goodness to be able to do what you want in life and do what's good. So just tell them discipline is freedom, and tell them to Google it and they'll figure it out. Yeah.
Namaskar, เจ้าค่ะ Yesterday you mentioned about intention and aspiration, and also you mentioned about you sent an email to Wat Apaikiri when you were 20. I would like to ask the question whether you can share with us your experience. What were your intention and how you keep your intention and aspiration throughout those years? And throughout this journey, what are the most difficulties that you have come across and how you overcome it? That's the first part of my question. The second part, the first part is more like the experience as someone who wants to become a monk and stay in a monkhood. my second part is more like a question for the lay person. For example, like for myself, I've been practicing for nearly 20 years or 20 years also. And as a lay person, you were trained when you're doing something, you set up goal, what you want to achieve. But throughout the years, then you realize that goal could become panha as well. So at the end, now I just like practice for the sake of practicing and start each day anew and take it as a present moment only. But then again, as a lay person, you have many other things that come into your life, which actually challenging you to forget your aspiration and your intention, or sometimes making you feel a little down, like what is going to happen, even because as you mentioned yesterday, this progress doesn't come every day, because everything is so many. It may be, if you look at it 5 years ago, 10 years ago, of course you have seen a lot of changes, like I become happy easier, and it take me more difficult to get supper or something like that. But yet again, I think many people in this room share the same experience. Every now and then, we need to be cheered up. That's why we come to the retreat. Or we need to be uplifting our mind with certain techniques or something. Perhaps you could shed some light based on your experience, or your experience you have come across any other lay person. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll answer the second part first, and we all need that. Even the monks need that to be uplifted from time to time. And the goal, setting the goal, is not necessarily tanha. It could also be chanda, which can be more wholesome, like Dhamma chanda is desire for the spiritual, desire for the Dhamma. So setting a goal of Dhamma is, for example, setting a goal of wanting to achieve sotapanna within this life, or at least at the time of death, which is very possible, even for lay people, I believe. That's Dhamma chanda. So that's good to have those goals and aspirations. It's similar to like every time you bow, saying, may I always be connected with the Dhamma. And that those goals and aspirations really are necessary, and they stay with us. So that's not a bad thing. We have to have chanda. We have to have desire. We have to have desire for Dhamma. If we don't have any desire, we won't really practice. We won't put energy into the practice. So we have to want something. We have to want to get somewhere. So the first part was my own aspiration. Yeah, I feel like people ordain for different reasons. Some people ordain because they read like an interesting Dhamma book and it's very inspiring, and then they ordain. And some people, like in Thailand, might ordain to make merit for their mother or father. And then some people ordain out of suffering, because they suffered a lot and want to find path out of suffering. So that third type is myself. I fall into that suffering category. So when I was younger, I suffered a lot, and I had as a child, I had a lot of issues, and as a teenager, I had a lot of problems and issues. So I did suffer a lot. I played music, and I did sports, and I was pretty talented, but I also suffered a lot, a huge amount of suffering. So I eventually, when I entered university, I wasn't really sure. The problem with university is I wasn't sure that I was doing something that would be of any benefit to myself or others. And so that's why I couldn't put my heart into university, and I ended up dropping out after a year and a half, and ended up hitting the road. And I actually, at that point, I already wanted to get better. I was only 19, but things were happening very fast, and I wanted to get better. I wanted to have a better life. So I remember it was a week before finals, and I made this determination for myself, like, okay, well, I'm just going to ask myself, what do I really want to do with my life? And then whatever the answer is, I'll just drop everything and just do it. So I was very impulsive. And so I asked myself, what do I really want to do? And the answer was, I really want to surf and play guitar. So I said, okay, I'm just going to drop everything. I got a one-way ticket to Hawaii, didn't go to my finals. My parents were very worried. And that was pretty much the best thing. It was a really good decision that I made there. That was like the beginning of my getting to the monastery. So I did start trying to pick up some sort of spirituality. I knew about Buddhism, but I didn't know exactly what it was. I had never known about Thailand or Thai monks. I had studied Tibetan Buddhism. So I did go to Hawaii and I surfed and played guitar, and I was in heaven for a little while, but then certain bad influences, drugs and so on, came back into my life slowly. So I tried to give all that up, but it came back through my work. I got a really good job on the North Shore of Kauai, making a lot of money as a waiter and surfing the best waves in the world at the North Shore of Kauai at Honolulu Bay. And those bad influences slowly came back in through my work. But even my boss was handing me alcoholic drinks. And even though I was only 19, 20. And so those bad influences slowly came back in. And then I started suffering again, really a lot. So I started seeking again. And then I was in Hawaii for 9 months. And I remember when I got very depressed at one point, and my father actually sent me a Luang Por book. And then that's how I discovered Luang Por. And he discovered it by chance in a used bookstore. Just it sort of called him and he bought it for himself. And then when I was very depressed, he mailed me this Luang Por book, and it was just what I was looking for. And then I found out that there was that he actually had Western disciples, and that there were these worldwide branch monasteries. So then I thought, wow, that's when I first started thinking about becoming a monk. But to that point, I didn't know anything about Thailand. All I knew was monks looked like Ajahn Chah. And because there was pictures of him, it was the book Still Forest Pool. And it had all these pictures of him in IMS in the 1970s, giving talks and blasting people with metta. So I read that book and then thought, yeah, I could probably do this. And I think this is what I'm looking for. So I went back to California where I grew up, and I started writing to different Dhamma centers all over the US, Tibetan centers, plus Abhayagiri I wrote to, and I wrote to a place called Crazy Wisdom Sangha in Berkeley. And then they responded to my letter saying, "We love crazy people. You're welcome anytime." So I didn't feel right about going there. And then I wrote to this place, Gampo Abbey in Nova Scotia, in Canada. It was a Tibetan center. And they wrote back and said, there's prerequisites to be able to go. You have to be able to meditate for 4 hours. And so I tried to meditate for 4 hours and I wasn't able to. And later I found out they meant 4 hours a day, but I thought they meant 4 hours in one session. Tried to meditate 4 hours and all I could do was 2 hours. And then I couldn't possibly meditate any longer than that. And it was so difficult. And so then I wrote to Abhayagiri. And well, actually, I was still interested in Tibetan Buddhism. So I wrote to this place, the Karmapa's place. There's a monk named Khenpo Kartar Rinpoche who just passed away, actually, very, very special monk who had a monastery in Woodstock, New York. And then I had written to Abhayagiri as well. So my idea was, if Abhayagiri doesn't work out, I'll ride my bike across the country and go to this place in New York. And so but the place in New York kind of had potential because this old monk he just passed away at the age of 100 recently, very special monk. And I wrote a letter to this place asking about ordination. And then I got a letter back from that place. So my letter got translated into Tibetan for the abbot. And then he wrote a letter in Tibetan, which got translated into English and sent back to me just to say, thank you for your letter. Thank you for your wholesome intentions. You wouldn't be able to ordain here. If you ordained with us, it would have to be in Nepal, but you're still welcome to come here if you want to do some construction work over the summer. Look forward to possibly meeting you or something like that. And he signed it in Tibetan, and I got a very good feeling from that. So I thought, and then Abhayagiri also wrote back, and it was Ajahn Achalo was the guest monk at Abhayagiri. He was the one who got my email. And all I wrote in the email was, I want to ordain. What do I do? And I didn't even sign it. I just was like very impulsive. And I heard later that when he got that email, there was another monk walking by, and Ajahn Achalo, then Tan Achalo, because he was only 4 pansa. He turned around and said, what should I do? This guy said he didn't even sign his email. He just wants to ordain. And he's just, and then the other monk said, oh, I would just delete it. And then Ajahn Achalo said, no, I think I'll just respond. So he responded, and then I was able to, he responded and said, oh yeah, this was early 2001. He said, well, if you want to make contact with us even before coming to the monastery, you could actually go to this Porcha Recollection Day in Los Angeles in San Francisco that they're going to be having, where there's going to be Dhamma talks about Ajahn Chah and a big get together, and you'll be able to meet the monks. And I wrote back, apparently, I don't remember this, but he said, I wrote back and said, yes, I could do that, but I'm actually not interested in doing anything other than ordaining. I just want to get to the monastery. I just want to ordain. But then it ended up that he was the first monk I met at Abhayagiri. And so we're still friends today. And he actually left soon after. I ordained as an anagarika, and then he left soon after that. The next part of the question is how to keep the aspiration going. And I think people who ordain through suffering tend to stay with it for a long time. My experience is that people who ordain because they want to make merit or because they read an interesting book, a lot of times they will end up leaving. But because when I first was there and I had all the discipline and it was helping me so much and I was so much happier, there was a lot of big changes right at first. And I was very dangjai, so I tried really hard to do what should be done. And Lumpur Pasano was very kind to me. Lumpur Amaro was also very kind to me. And the monastery, I was very happy with the monastery. And eventually I got the opportunity to come to Thailand. The rule at Abhayagiri is that you can come to Thailand for your 3rd pansa. So you can stay for 1 year in your 3rd pansa, and then you go back to Abhayagiri. So this is what we call Dasana Suksa. It's like our field trip education, and we're visual education. Lumpur Liam loves using that word, Dasana Suksa. It's like you learn by seeing, you learn by experiencing. And that when I came to Thailand and I got to spend time at Pujam Gom and Dowdam and spent Pansa at Wapananachat with Ajahn Yanadamo and got to experience all of that, and spent 1 month at Wat Nong Papong with Lumpur Liam, then I was, that gave me that was when I first started thinking like I might be able to keep doing this for my whole life. Especially meeting Lumpur Liam and living with him, it gave me the idea like, oh, right, monks are supposed to be peaceful. Okay, that was like a new idea for me. Like, because at Abhayagiri, I was just trying so hard and working so hard. Like, oh, well, Lumpur Liam is working really hard and he's incredibly peaceful. so how can you do that? And so I was very impressed. And then I already decided that after my 5 pansa, because after 5 pansa, you're freed from dependence. I just already decided after that, that after 5, I would go back to Thailand longer. So then I went back to Thailand and spent 4 years in Thailand that time and lived at what I spent my 7th pansa at Wat Nong Papong. I was there for 5 months and got to know Lumpur Liam even better. And yeah, then it was doubts still came up, but it wasn't like before. Like doubts still came up, or wanting to disrobe still came up, but it was kind of like passing. Like I just thought, just keep going. Bai lei lei. You just keep going. So I have enough. I think it's faith and a belief in karma that helps keep us going. And that idea that we only truly fail if we give up. But if we don't give up, then we might make a lot of mistakes. We might even stop practicing for a while. But if we keep the precepts and we keep moving in the same direction, then we haven't really failed. We only fail if we completely give up, completely stop practicing. So even if we get to the point where we're only doing 10 minutes a day, at least we have something we're holding on to. So something consistent. Like what I do for myself now is I have certain chants that I do every morning, and it takes about 10 minutes and I never miss it. And that's like one thing that it's like a thread that if everything else falls apart, at least I do these chants that I do every single morning, and that kind of keeps me with the Dhamma. One more question.
Namaskaran ka. Just a follow-up question to your story. You mentioned that you were tense and paying sort of like a lot of attention and tense and stress before, and you see Lumpur Liam, who's actually very determined, but at the same time peaceful. So what did you notice in him, and how did you sort of like make adjustment to your practice?
Yeah, I just noticed he wasn't worried about anything. It was like he's the head of over 350 branch monasteries. And if the worst possible things, when there's a lot of monks, some pretty bad things happen at the monasteries sometimes. And if nobody else can deal with it, like the problem has to go to him. And I saw people coming to him with like the most extreme problems. And it seemed like the worse the problem was, the more he was delighting and letting go. Like he was just like, he was dealing with it. He was dealing with these problems, but he was not at all invested in the world, not at all involved in the world, and totally uninterested in the world. It was very amazing. So it seemed like somebody would come and think, this thing happened. You won't believe it. It's totally crazy. And Lumpur would just be like, he would take his oil and kind of like, no, my ban lai. Like, Dhamada. He would say that. He would be like, oh, Dhamada. It's like, hai tan ma yu ti ni, mai tong yu ti nan, job. Like, and he would just be like totally not worried about it. Like, but don't you think like he should be punished or something? Like my dong tamalai gadai. It's very amazing to see that. So that, yeah, just seeing him interact in like day to day, that was very impressive. Yeah. Because he was not avoiding problems, but he was like interacting with people, but not suffering. There was no suffering. Okay, maybe we have time for one more.
Well, your life. I kept on wondering if it was totally come out of that. Because it just started with first of all, the first time. And your life, so on and on and on and on. And I listened well to talk about his retirement, and everybody knows that he has plans, and he say there were a few candidates that would like to be adults, but he just listened. But he pointed out it was someone who didn't come to be. And when he asked about that, and he refused to be an abbot. And after all, at the end, he got an eye on someone who would be abbot, and he forced him to become abbot.
Hi.
And what I'm asking you is, is it all about the Dhamma and stuff? And what is the notation in English Dhamma?
It's not all Dhamma Jat San. I mean, you can say that, but it's also knowing to do the right thing in accordance to Dhamma. So like, it's also Dua Eng Jat San. But it's knowing that I didn't want to do it, but I knew it was right according to Dhamma because he's my teacher and I knew it would help and I knew I could do it and I can speak Thai. It's helpful to have somebody who could speak Thai. And I knew I had the abilities to do it. See, the interesting thing here is that when I was a junior monk, I wanted to be the abbot because I thought if I'm abbot, it will be the perfect monastery. And I will do everything perfect and everybody else will do everything perfect. And then later on, I thought, oh, wait, it doesn't work like that. They don't do what you say. Not everybody thinks the same way as you. Not everybody will listen to you. And then I didn't want to be abbot anymore. I thought, no, that's way too difficult. And that's not at all something I want to be doing, but I knew I had some leadership abilities. Like I had been the work monk a long time at Abhayagiri. So I did have some leadership abilities, but I did try to escape from being abbot as long as possible. And then eventually in 2017, I was in Thailand again for a third time. And Lompa Pasano called me back to Abhayagiri to start being co-abbot with Ajahn Kurunadamo. But at the beginning, Ajahn Kurunadamo already said he's only going to do it for 2 years because he's old already. He also wanted to retire. So it's just more to get me started. But I didn't know what I was getting into. And I was really grateful for Ajahn Achalo because he invited me to go do this 1,000 hours of sitting with him in India. And that was right before becoming abbot. And I was asking Buddha Barami for all the help I could get and hoping that it was going to be okay. And I was willing to do it, but I didn't know what I was getting into. So it's actually good that I didn't know what I was getting into. So when I went and there was all sorts of, like the very first thing, Ajahn Kurunadamo found it very difficult too. The very first thing we had to do as co-abbot was ask a novice to leave who was misbehaving and wouldn't stop misbehaving. And I've never asked somebody to leave before. And Longpa Pasano was like, no, he has to leave. But you guys have to do it. I was like, Longpa, you made the decision. You should just tell him. It's like, no, you guys have to do it. I'm on sabbatical now. And so he was about to leave for his 1 year away. And so we had to sit down with this novice and like kick him out of the monastery. I was was like our first act as co-abbots. That was very, very difficult and very painful. But yeah, since then, you know, it reminds me of a story of Luang Por Chah, because Luang Por Chah also was a reluctant abbot, and he saw himself. Luang Por Chah had a great practice, but he was not keen on teaching people because he thought maybe most people could not be taught. And but then Luang Por Chah later, he said, I didn't really develop real wisdom until I was an abbot. And so that's because he had to work with a large number of different types of people. And he said it really helped to develop his wisdom to a higher level than it had been before. And it helped his practice a lot. So I can see that for myself, I've matured a lot in the past 5 years, that there's been a maturing process. And the issue is now, it was just so difficult though through the COVID time and becoming Ajahn Kuradamo, stepping back and becoming the main guy. And it's so difficult because I'm normally someone who likes to disappear, not have people pay attention to me. But as abbot, everybody's looking at you. What is he going to do next? How is he today? How is he feeling today? It looks like he might not be doing so well today. Oh, he's doing good today. And like everybody is looking at you all the time. So for me, it's like that idea, like just wanting to run away. And it was there was a lot of good experiences over the past 5 years, and I learned a lot, but also I told Luang Por, I said, I need a break now. And so now I'm trying to get it in my mind to go back for like the next chapter. And in a way, it's actually more difficult because now I know what I'm getting into. Before I didn't know, but now I know what I'm doing. Now I know exactly what it is. So it actually makes it more difficult to go back to it. But I have it in my mind, just, okay, just keep, because I know it's going to be the best. I know it's going to be the best for my practice. Because I could, if I went with what I want, actually, I have to say here that Luang Por Liam gave me some really good advice when it was when Ajahn Kuradamo was just going to step down and I was going to be the one abbot. And I was in Thailand with Luang Por Pasano in 2019, and we were together and we went to see Luang Por Liam together. So it's just Luang Por Liam, Luang Por Pasano, and myself. And Luang Por Pasano was explaining to Luang Por Liam that he wanted me to be the one to be running it from then on, and Ajahn Kuradamo was going to be stepping down. And so normally Luang Por Liam, when he hears about abbot, he says like Luang Por Liam has said things like, what's the job of the abbot? The job of the abbot is just to show everybody where the toilets are. Like Luang Por Liam has said that. Or like if somebody is going to become abbot, he just says like Jiao Wat ka mai mi alai ka tam nati, like he'll just say things like that. But in this case, he said, oh, Jiao Wat abayagiri kong jenak. He said, that's going to be heavy. But then he said, it's through lifting heavy things that you get strong. And that's the only way to get strong. And then he said, I also said something like, I said, no, I was just thinking it. I was thinking, I really want to stay in Thailand. And he said, like, I know you want to stay in Thailand. I didn't say it. I was just thinking it. He said, I know you want to stay in Thailand. He said, but if you just always go with what you want, your practice will never develop fully. So that gave me the Gamlang Jai to go back. Okay. พอสมควรแก่เวลา